be talking to Eric Baxter, who's the VP and Senior Counsel of Beckett Fund. Beckett Fund is a law firm that works on religious liberty cases at the trial and appellate level. And Eric joined Beckett as Senior Counsel in 2011. Eric, welcome to Faith Under Fire.
Good to be here with you. Thanks.
Absolutely. Just to give listeners background on your work, I'm reading notes here, but it's really cool. You've had lots of success at even the Supreme Court level, and something that's very interesting, I think, to myself and to a lot of listeners is two of them were InterVarsity Christian Fellowship versus Iowa, and then Business Link University of Iowa. And these were very important. Just kind of give a brief rundown on those cases and why they're important.
Yeah, these were cases involving students who wanted to gather weekly to talk about their religious beliefs and how they would help them in the business world. They had religious requirements for their leaders. Unsurprisingly, they wanted their leaders to be able to pray to the same God they prayed to preach from the Bible the same way they wanted to preach from the Bible. One student got offended by those standards and filed a discrimination claim with the university. We spent 3 years defending the student group, literally a group of 10 students who wanted to meet together, defending them through the process, taking it all the way to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, successfully ended up getting attorney's fees out of the state of Iowa for allowing this lawsuit to proceed. But establishing that students have the right to meet on campus, they have the right to select leaders who support their beliefs or their philosophy. This could be like Democrats want Democratic leaders in their student club. Surprise, surprise. So really should have been a common sense issue, but one that we spent 3 years litigating to confirm that the students shouldn't be discriminated against on campus just because they want to be part of student groups that, support their beliefs.
Massively important case because this affects nonprofits, ministries, churches, mosques. It's like this is very big in the nonprofit sector and the ministry sector because it's like you said, it should be common sense. Yeah,
that's right. And it's surprising how often this happens. People think it's America. Why would we have religious liberty lawyers? But it's surprising how many organizations will sue a religious group because they want to select leaders who support their religious mission. And so it's an incredibly important case. The University of Iowa case was funny because there they tried, instead of just kind of letting our students in from the front, they said, oh, well, we'll just cancel all religious groups on campus. And so we went before a judge and she was like, wait, I told you not to do X and you went and did double X? Like, what are you thinking? So it's surprising kind of how deeply entrenched these ideas are in some state and local governments. And so we're, happy to be able to represent our clients and confirm their rights to live out their religious beliefs through their ministries.
Well, hats off to you on your work on those cases. Brilliant. I'm very familiar with the Beckett Fund. I've been in advocacy work and persecution work for 20 years. But you recently came to mind because of your work on a case involving Montgomery County, Maryland schools. I live in Montgomery County, so it's especially intriguing to me. But talk about this case and what's going on.
Back in the fall of 2023 or 2022, I guess, the school board introduced a bunch of new storybooks for kids pre-K. So you're talking 3 and 4-year-olds through 5th grade, 10 years old. These books are all pushing a transgender ideology, introducing kids to pride parades, asking kids to telling kids that doctors guessed at their sex when they were born, they should discover their own gender identity, telling, young children that they should pick which bathroom they want to use. Issues that are extremely sensitive. Parents have long had the right to kind of control the education of the children on those issues. In fact, Montgomery County itself, its own policies, very generous, say if there's any subject matter that violates your religious beliefs, you can opt out.
Yep.
Maryland law has long said whenever you're teaching human sexuality, you have to allow parental opt-outs. So all the school year 2023, school board allowed it. On March 22nd, 2023, they went on Fox News and said, hey, stop worrying. We allow opt-outs. The very next day, they said, actually, never mind. We're no longer going to notify parents when we read these books to their kids, and we'll no longer allow an opt-out. And that upset a lot of parents. As you can imagine, we have over 300 families that are part of this lawsuit. They're simply asking for the right to opt their kids out. They're not even trying to get the books out of the school.
Right.
They are simply saying, if there's something that our kids are reading, especially on issues of sexuality and gender for kids who are as young as 3 and 4 years old, we had to have the right to say, this is not age appropriate and not religiously appropriate for our kids. We want an opt-out. One of the surprising things is, Montgomery County has a history of pushing these kinds of issues. They've been shot down before by a judge in the early 2000s on a similar issue. The school board's own union for elementary school principals wrote a letter to the board saying this is totally inappropriate. It's age inappropriate. It's shaming to kids who have different beliefs. It disregards parental religious concerns. They said we shouldn't want. Some of the books talk about playground romances, kids falling in love with other kids. And they said there's no way we should be talking about these issues with kids
Crazy.
in the classroom. But, a court in Montgomery County, federal court in Montgomery County said, once you put your kids in public school, you don't have any rights to what's being said. You can teach them whatever you want at home. But
we own them.
Totally ignoring the idea that kids who are, at that age especially, adore their teachers. Their minds are very impressionable. They hear these things. They can't get them out of their minds. They often just believe because their teacher, an authority figure, told them.
Yeah.
And so it's very challenging, and a lot of parents are very concerned about it. We're getting ready now to take this case to the United States Supreme Court. I'm not sure they'll take it this time. We hope they'll take it. It's a super important issue for parents around the country.
Yeah, and if they don't take it, are other cases like this brewing out there and advancing?
Yeah, I think we'll see these types of cases. You've seen these in a lot of other contexts, schools that adopt policies that they won't notify parents if their children are questioning their identity or things like that. Times when parents have an especially important role to help their children, guide their children through these very, very sensitive issues. And so I think that these issues will come up again, but we're hopeful the court will take a look at it this next spring.
Okay. And we're going to talk about other cases and other things out there that are brewing. And I just want to get your opinion on something. Like I said, I've worked in persecution for 20 some years. And so I just see every trick out there that governments do around the world and the dictator and despot. And here's how it goes, Eric. This is no surprise to you, but the dictator says we have religious freedom in our country. Now, when you get down to it, what does that mean? It means that you have religious freedom in the space of your own mind. And as long as you keep that in your tiny, cramped little apartment, don't share it with anybody, don't share it even with your family, don't distribute books, thoughts, etc. You see, we have religious freedom. It's not for the public square. And what's really alarming to me is this seems to be the obvious push among so many that are not religious in our country, thinking that's what the founder set up or that's what should be. But it seems like that's the trend going in that same direction. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we see, again, a lot of these, especially in funding type cases. I'm suing the state of Minnesota right now. They have a program that's been in place for nearly 40 years where the state will pay for students who are juniors or seniors in high school to go to any college in the state. The credits they earn there are dual credits. They count toward high school and college. It's benefited, thousands of students.
Yeah.
And a wide variety of universities that provide these credits. Last year, the Minnesota legislature passed a law saying, if you are a religious school that requires students to uphold your faith, we won't allow these funds to go there. It's okay for you to be religious. Of course you can be religious, but we're not going to let you be religious at the same, we're not going to fund you. We'll fund a party school. We'll fund a party with any other kind of ideology. But if it's a religious school that actually requires the students to kind of, support the faith, we're not going to let you have fun. So it's really just discriminating against students, telling students if you're religious, you can't choose the school you want. Everybody else can. And these should be obvious violations of religious freedom principles in the United States. But we have 5 or 6 cases on this same principle where it's like, we're going to withhold funding if you're too religious. If you look too religious, then we're not going to allow you to participate in this otherwise generally available program that everybody gets to participate, no questions asked.
And, I'm no expert, but I think it's pretty clear what the founders were doing. They were very pro-religion. They said, but we're not going to pick and choose, but we definitely don't want to discriminate. So how did groups, organizations, local governments get so far off? What's going on?
Yeah, there was a period when the Supreme Court just got off base on Establishment Clause cases, for example, where they said, any manifestation of religion in the public square, we have to do this intense analysis of whether anybody might think that the government's trying to push you into religion. That got really to a level of absurdity because you can imagine there's a million different opinions on like how much religion in this public square feels like too much. And so we've gone through decades of where, like, the most recent case where fortunately the Supreme Court kind of shifted course finally was
Yeah.
involved a World War I cross in Maryland.
Yep.
It was erected to honor all of the people who fought in World War I and died, gave their lives. It was, a lot of different meanings in the cross, a symbol of the death and sacrifice. It could have religious meaning. It could have other meanings for people. We had one judge in the process of going up to the Supreme Court say, "Oh, just chop the arms off of the cross." So, this decades old memorial, like, okay, like that's going to solve this problem. Do we really have to strip every
Wow.
indicia of religion from the public square? Luckily, the Supreme Court came back and said, look, we've kind of gotten this wrong in the past. We're going to look to history and tradition. What did the founders really think was a violation of the Establishment Clause? They had a very narrow view. No official churches, no compulsion to participate in religious activities, no punishment for not being religious, those types of things. But religion itself is organic to human nature. It's inherent in who we are. There's a natural desire to celebrate together, to mourn together. Religious people want to do that in religious ways. There's not a violation of the Establishment Clause to recognize that religion is a part of human life. And so we're seeing the Supreme Court kind of shift directions on that and are hopeful. But that history led a lot of governments to say, like, oh, any kind of funding of religion, anything we do that helps religion, we're going to get sued on it. And so it started out of, I think, a fear of being sued.
Yeah.
It's kind of become entrenched in some places with a little bit of religious animosity.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to root that out and say, look, religion in the public square is a normal and natural part of life, and it's not a violation of the Constitution.
Yeah, and I think you said it, just to bring it out a little more clearly, and I'm more of an educated observer. You're the expert, but it seems like we really have turned a corner where you saw all those previously bad cases, and the Supreme Court there's been any number of really positive cases that you would say, hey, this is sanity. This is what the founders wanted. So that's not my imagination. We're seeing that in the courts.
Yeah. I mean, one of the old cases was like, court analyzing a whole winter display, like the Christmas tree, the menorah, the Santa, the sleigh, the crash, and kind of going element by element and saying, like, okay, this is too religious. That's, so you have these absurd decisions like the menorah is okay, the Christmas tree is okay, the crash is not okay, the presents are okay, the reindeer not okay, whatever.
Gosh.
And I think, for one thing, the courts have just started saying, like, look, this is ridiculous. Like, we shouldn't be in the business of, like, telling communities how they celebrate together. As long as there's obviously, nobody wants discrimination against people who don't share a prevailing religious belief, who don't participate in a religious celebration. But there's nothing wrong with communities kind of celebrating their heritage, celebrating their beliefs. And communities should be able to kind of manage that without invoking a constitutional crisis and calling in judges to negotiate every element of that celebration. So I think the court is moving in a good direction on that issue. And hopefully that will have spillover effect in telling governments to not be so fearful of partnering with religion and so forth.
Yeah. And that being said, tell us about some other negative outcomes in influential cases. I'm looking at a couple, but I'm gonna see what you come up with.
Yeah, I mean, some are things that you've probably heard about. We have New York is still pushing an abortion coverage mandate, forcing employers to cover abortion for all of their employees, for example. The Supreme Court already sent that back to the New York courts once, and they kind of refused to do the right thing. That's going up later next month. Others involving Native Americans worship on public lands. We have a long history of having deprived Native Americans of their rights, pushing them into corners, promising that we'll do certain things that we don't fulfill those promises. We've got a case out in Arizona right now where the government's saying total destruction of sacred worship land where there's sacred worship for Native Americans. And we're saying to the government, look, you at least have to weigh the costs of this, and that this definitely burdens Native Americans' religious rights. The government should be put to the same test it does for every other religious practice. Does it really have a compelling government interest in destroying this practice or this worship site? And if there's a less restrictive way to meet its needs, it needs to do that. And courts have been balking on that issue as well. So those are a couple of the big things we have going up to the Supreme Court this year, where we're hopeful that the court will take a closer look and kind of put into place some stronger protections, both for Native Americans and other religious observers.
And I didn't prep you with this, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. I'm assuming you know, but if you don't, no problem. Missouri Department of Corrections versus Finney. This sounds really dangerous to me. What's the deal there?
The case name's not ringing a bell, so what's the facts and maybe I'll know.
Religious discrimination and jury selection.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
I have seen that case. Yeah. I mean, I haven't looked at the details of that case. Again, I think this falls into the kind of the misconception, the fear of religious individuals, that if religious people will be biased by their beliefs and so forth. Everybody comes into a jury selection process with their own biases, political biases, social biases, religious, I don't even want to say biases, just like foundations of how they believe and think. That's part of, again, religion is part of American life, it's part of how we form our views. Much of our legal system has roots in kind of religious 10 commandments, religious principles of like the value and dignity of human life. And so you can't strip those out of the process, and you can't exclude religious people from public life just based on their religion. And so that is an important issue that, hopefully the courts will get right as it moves forward.
Yeah. Something I think a lot today. I'm on the air a lot, and I call out for this kind of thinking. But why is it important for conservative religious groups with very different theologies, important theological difference, but Mormons, Catholics, evangelicals, Jews, Muslims, why is it important to work together?
Yeah, I think something that a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the cases that are the foundation of religious liberty in the United States probably were protecting religious beliefs that a lot of Americans wouldn't agree with.
Yeah.
It makes sense that it's usually going to be the minority religious believers who most come into conflict with kind of normal laws or even targeted by governments. And so they're the ones who have historically been forced to go to court to defend their rights. And so, we've defended, for example, people who engage in goat sacrifice as part of their religion. So we've defended people who want to wear, turbans and beards in the military
Sikhs, yeah.
for religious reasons, Sikhs and Muslims. And, there's always someone on one side or the other of the political divide who's really upset about one of our cases. And the point we're always trying to make is, look, when you protect one person's religion, you're really protecting everybody's. It's cases of Sikhs, Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Latter-day Saints that end up protecting the rights of Catholics and Protestants and Jews later. So it's, every win for religious liberty is a win for all religious groups, and every loss for religious liberty has the potential to negatively impact every other religious group.
Well said. Last question. I want you to speak to other attorneys and tell us about calling. Why would an attorney do this type of work? There's a lot better ways. There's a lot more lucrative ways to make a living as a skilled attorney at your level. Why do you do this?
Yeah, well, I spent about 10 years in big law, and then came here to Beckett about 13 years ago.
Yeah.
It is really an amazing field to work in because you're the best of clients, people who sincerely want to do good. They believe their conscience is calling them to do work for a higher good. They're hesitant to sue. They don't like to sue. A lot of times it's kind of contra.
In their corner, yeah.
Yeah, it's against their theology, or they just have concerns about, it's discouraged by their theology. They're backed into a corner. Sometimes they're suing, we've had Sikh clients, for example, who are suing the military, one of the most powerful organizations in the world. It's their employer, it controls their life. And they're thinking, like, if I sue, am I ever going to be able to have a career in the military? So they're courageous individuals and organizations. It takes a lot to sue. The issues are, of course, fascinating. They go to the very heart of what it means to be a human, that we all have dignity before our Creator. Or as human beings, even if you're not a religious believer, that as human beings we all have inherent dignity and the right to live out our lives according to our deeply held beliefs. And so, being able to involve with the best clients, the best cause, it's really a satisfying work. And I've never looked back. Let's just say that.
No, I get it. Yeah, and I came from banking. I came from finance and banking, and so same thing. It's just like, and it's really, I think part of what you're saying too is there's pay, there's what the world can give you as goodies, but then there's meaning, which is so rare in life, and we're so transient, and we're looking for it, and when you find it, it's extremely rewarding, and you're willing to give up all kinds of things for it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's an accurate description.
Well, just want to say thank you. Thank you for your work. Keep it up. We'll check in again with you in the future.
Well, thanks to you and your listeners. We appreciate the support that we get from people.
All right. God bless.
You.